Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's special council meeting regarding the development charge bylaw. I'll call this meeting to order at 7:03, and we'll start off with our territorial land acknowledgement. Before our meeting gets underway, I would like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land, and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation, with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectively acknowledge that the township of Allumwek-Haldimand is located on the Mississaugan-Ashanindick territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississaugan-Ashanindick. The township of Allumwek-Haldimand respectively acknowledges that the Mississaugan Nation are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and the integrity for generations to come. Moving on to item 3, I'll ask for a disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Seeing none, that'll duly be recorded. Number 4, items on the agenda as circulated. Be it resolved that the agenda for the special council session of Wednesday, March the 29th, 2023 be approved as circulated. Mover and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Stover, Councillor O'Neill. Are there any discussions regarding this? All in favor? Motion is carried. Opposed? None? Okay. The continuing development charge bylaw. I think Bob's, oh no. Be it resolved, the council of the township of Allumwek-Haldimand receive and file the notice of public meeting regarding the continuing development charge bylaw. And the notice of the meeting, March 29th, 2023, with the development charges bylaw. And I believe you had, Pat, you told me it was well announced in several different papers, etc. Okay. Got you a mover and a seconder for that then, please. Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Deputy Mayor Stover. Further discussions? All in favor? That's carried. Tonight we have a presentation by Bob Clark of Clark Consulting Services regarding our development charges. And Bob, if you'd like to come to the podium, we'd be happy to listen to you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed, members of council and members of the public. Yes, I have a PowerPoint presentation. I think oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Bob Clark. I'm a planning consultant and we do development charges studies. We have prepared to develop the development charges study for Township of Allumwek-Haldimand, and this presentation is very similar to the one that was presented to council earlier, but in the interest of making sure that the public is aware of what is involved, well, I will go through it again. Do I ask for the next slide, or okay, I'm not in control here, so I'll have to ask. Okay, if you could give me the next slide, please. We've prepared a background study, and it's required in order to be able to justify the charges which are included in the bylaw of the development charges bylaw. The study outlines the basis for the charge and includes a calculation. We've done a calculation of a residential, a non-residential charge, and we've also included an environment or a non-solar charge as well. And that I understand that study has been made available to people, anyone who is interested in reviewing that material. If I could have my next slide, please. The basic principles of the development charge. It allows municipalities to pass a bylaw that raises revenues for new development to offset the costs incurred by the municipality as a result of growth. And the principles are that growth must pay its fair share and the cost of services should be fairly distributed between new and long-term development. And that's the challenges of the development charge study, is to make that calculation. So I will review that. The services that have been included, these are determined by the Development Charges Act, and they include a general government charge for basically the administration, the protection of people and property, which includes the fire protection, bylaw enforcement, emergency measures, and community policing. So those charges that the municipality pays for, the services that they pay for, it includes public works, both buildings, equipment, and roads. If I can have the next slide, please. With respect to the more recreational services, it includes the arena, recreation community centers, library, cemeteries, and bulk water, which is available from the Grafton Water Supply. And we have included a special area charge for the Grafton Water Supply that services the Grafton area itself. And it applies just to the area that is serviced by the water supply from the Grafton water system. I can have the next slide, please. The justified amount for residential development is the calculation that's made after the consideration of the value of the existing assets, the value of development-related capital expenditures, which are anticipated, and the level of projected growth. So the idea here is that we can make a realistic valuation of the assets. We have an estimate for the cost of upgrading that infrastructure and the amount of projected growth in which will be serviced by that. So in the case of the two charges we're looking at a charge involving the entire municipality, and then we're looking at a specific charge for the water system in Grafton itself. The justified charge in 2017, which was the last development charge study, was just over $9,000 per unit. The justified charge in our study, which was conducted in 2022, was $14,030 per unit, 30 cents per unit. The increase in charge is as a result of several factors, one being the increased value of the existing assets that are used, the increased cost in providing new infrastructure, and we all know that has increased in the past several years. And the other issue, of course, is the amount of growth that is being developed, and that can vary. We have relied on the growth projections, which are available from the county and from your own official plan. Council do have an ability to make a determination about the actual charge. The justified amount is the amount that can be charged to the development charge, and there is the potential that council may make a determination for a slightly reduced charge if that's appropriate, and that is entirely council's decision. The next slide, please. The background report is based on the information, and our principal source of information was your recently completed asset management plan. And it has, as I've indicated, been available to the public on the municipal website, so that is available. We've done a comparison of neighboring development charges, and you can see that they do vary considerably. The justified charge here for residential for Alnwick Haldeman is the $14,000 and change, and the non-residential charge was $1,008.94. The water charge for Grafton was $11,125.34. And for the non-residential charge, now I can explain that the residential charge is based on a unit. So each residential unit is expected to pay this amount. For the non-residential, it's on a square meter, a floor area basis, so a square meter each basis. And finally, we've done a charge for green energy, and that's $13,234. I'll review that in a minute. Okay. The existing bylaw was due to expire approximately 5 years after, so it would have expired in 2022. But because of COVID, that expiry has been extended. So that bylaw can continue until the province makes a determination that the bylaw needs to expire. Thank you. Yes, Bill 23 has had an impact on many things, and it also has had an impact on development charges. There is no charge for enlargement of an existing residence by unit 2 or 3, and the addition of a residential unit in an existing or new residential building is not chargeable. So that, and in the bylaw, we've included those provisions, the draft bylaw that we prepared. We've included those provisions so that the individuals seeking to add a residential unit to an existing residence will not be charged for that additional unit. And housing services are no longer an eligible service. I don't believe that was an issue for this particular calculation. And affordable and attainable housing units are exempt from development charges. And those terms are defined, and an individual seeking to be exempted for those must make proof that they qualify for those two particular types of housing units. Affordable, 80% of market value. Attainable is a special type of housing which is being constructed with specific requirements, and the bylaw and the bill will define what attainable means, but essentially it's a subsidized or effective special housing arrangement. Thank you. Where a special charge is applied to a new bylaw will be required, and that's the situation in the water charge area for Grafton. That a new bylaw is required, and we're preparing that. Nonprofit housing is exempt, and the average level of service has been extended from 10 years to 15 years. So that means that the level of services, we used to do a calculation on 10 years, it's now been extended to 15. And there's a 4-year transition in charge. The first year it starts at 80%, then it goes 85%, second year 90, 95 and third, and then it's the 5th year that it is a full charge. So an individual seeking a building permit for a residential unit would only pay 80% of the justified or the bylaw charge in the first year. So that is a way of transiting. The life of the charge, it's been extended from 5 years to 10 years now. So your bylaw will be effective for 10 years. And there's a discounted DC for rental housing based on the number of bedrooms. And that discount will be reflected in the new bylaw. And the interest rate that's chargeable, that is for individuals who have not paid the charge and are paying after the fact. There is an interest rate which is chargeable when people are late in paying their charge. The other interesting thing is that in your reserve fund, which is the money that's collected for development charges, is captured in a reserve fund. And at least 60% of the monies in the reserve fund, which are allocated for that year, have to be spent. That is a new provision, and it will require careful monitoring of your reserve fund and an allocation of funding within your reserve fund on an annual basis to make sure that you are actually using the reserve fund rather than holding it and not making use of it. Thank you. We've done a comparison of the existing charge and the justified charge, and you can see that some of the particular values have increased rather dramatically, but some of them have actually declined. The Parks and Rec in particular has declined. And the total charge is indicated there for both the DC and for the water. With respect to the non-residential charge, council have directed us to look at 50% of the justified charge, and that is feasible. And that's what we've indicated here. And of that, if it's an institutional use, it pays 50% of the actual commercial industrial charge. The previous charge was $15.93 per square meter. And you can see that this has resulted in a significant increase. The increase is due to the higher value of the services and lower projected growth. So the water system, we have a non-residential charge for the water system as well. And that's the $38.46. Thank you. We've included a green energy charges, and that is based on solar and wind energy, and it's based on a per 500 kilowatt capacity charge. And that is as a result of solar and wind requiring certain services. And we're looking particularly here at public roads services and access services as the principal use. And this is an equivalency to a residential charge. And we have made that recommendation for you. The approval procedure, we will update the draft bylaw that's been before council. We're looking for direction from council. The notice of the public meeting, and the public meeting is being held this evening. Then with council direction and our preparation of your final draft, there is the passing of the bylaw, and then the notice of passing has to be issued within 20 days of passing. And there's an appeal period of 40 days from the council decision. So that, and you have to, the individuals who make presentations this evening would be eligible for an appeal. Those are my comments. I'm certainly open to any questions, and I'll be available. I'm most interested in what you get from any public comments that come forward, and we'll certainly look at those.
Thank you, Bob. I'll read the resolution, and then we'll open it up for public questions from the from council. So be it resolved that the council of the township of Alma-Calderman allow, oh, we've already done that one. Haven't we? Okay. Be resolved that the council of the township of Alma-Calderman receive Bob Clark's report, and that should do it. Right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So could I get a mover and a seconder for that report? Moved by Mary Catherine, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. Discussions, comments. I have one right off the bat. I think we should have OPP policing in there rather than community policing.
That is what that is what's covered under there.
Community policing is, OPP is not?
The OPP is your, I understood, and I will double check this, but I understood that community policing was provided by OPP.
Well, community policing was a function of members of the residents, was a council committee.
Okay.
And actually that committee is no longer in existence. So I think the OPP should be considered in that. Maybe Nicole, can you help me in that, or?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I think it's been at least a couple of years. I mean, since I have been with the municipality, we haven't had an active community policing committee, and we still have an active police services board, which is funded. sorry, it's the OPP portion.
Yeah, I don't know if that has any effect on, go ahead, Pat.
So I would just suggest that we use Police Services Board, so whether it's the OPP or another
Okay,
service, then it would be covered.
okay, that would make
I will
sense.
certainly have a look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A couple other things, Bob, you know, when you mentioned the 80, the 85, the 90 and the 95, if we take the roughly $14,000, does that mean in the year, whenever this is approved, the first year we'll charge 80% of that $14,000?
That's correct.
And that will be basically the same, roughly the same as they're paying now, a little bit more, but.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, through
Yep.
you, Mayor, or Mayor Logo. I just did a quick calculation here. 80% of the $14,030 DC that's recommended would result in $11,224. Currently, the development charge that we're collecting is $11,813 and change, so it's actually less. Because each year we indexed the development charge by the construction price index. So that in the first year, it would actually be less than what we're collecting right now.
Okay,
The second year, it would increase to 12,000. The third year, it would be 12,600. The fourth year, it would be 13,300, and in year 5, it would be 1430. Now, I'm assuming that the construction price indexing would also apply. So each year when you
Yes.
increase it 5%, you'll be increasing it 5%, plus you'll be able to increase it by the construction price index amount.
That's correct.
oh,
So
okay,
by 2027, that's when the full DC would be, well, halfway through 2027 would be when the full development charges would
Would
come
be-
into effect.
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you. The water bylaw that you were mentioning,
Yes.
we'd have to change or add, we don't have it. The water or pardon me, the water DC charges now as part of the whole DC charges, and we have to have a special one for the water bylaw. Is that what I'm,
Well, my understanding, and I will double check this, is that we can include that charge in your bylaw.
oh, in the one, okay, but we just have to have a separate
Yes.
section for it?
We have to have a separate section.
Okay, thank you. And the charges by department, I'm glad you brought that up. Boy, it really, you know, the residential has stayed relatively the same.
Yeah.
But some of the, you know, the emergency services, and I assume that has a lot to do with fire. You know, we certainly built a new building and have purchased quite a bit of equipment.
Yeah.
So that's probably affecting it.
I would expect so, yes.
And as well as the roads with the assets going up a fair bit has probably shot that development charge up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the one that's really come down though is the parks and rec and arenas. And I guess I've got to ask the question because I just wanted to make sure, had we built a new arena, then that would have been a lot different as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, we would have been paying an awful lot more for that portion of the development charge. I'm always asked lots of questions about development charges because it's not that they change or nothing, but it just takes me a while to get it through here.
And we've included in your bylaw, we've included the basis for the charge. So that your staff can certainly double check those numbers.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from council or comments? Go ahead, Mary Catherine.
Mayor Lowell. Question about multi-units
Yes.
residences. So we have at least one that's prepared. It's already in process to be built here, and presumably when we're looking at affordable housing, we're going to have other multi-unit residences coming forward, as well as mobile homes in the mobile park or something like that. Do they just pay that staying unit, or will there be a separate category?
Yeah, in the past, in municipalities like Illinois Calderman, we have used a standard charge per unit. There is an opportunity to reduce that for multi-units, but it's usually an apartment building that has more than 10 units that would result in a lower development charge. And so I'm certainly in your hands if you want to look at that, but having reviewed, and thank you for telling me that this question was coming. So I've done a little bit of research, and in other municipalities where there are apartments, they have reduced the charge by between 65 and 75% of the single family charge. But a single and a semi is usually charged at the justified rate, or what council sets as the rate. And then there is a reduction for multi-unit, but they're usually, as I say, 10 or more units in that multi-unit
I'm
apartment.
still not clear. So the 5 units, would we be charging as 5 residences then?
Yes, we would. That's the proposal anyway. I'm certainly in council's hands if you feel that you want to make an adjustment. We're certainly prepared to look at that. But that is what I've seen in other municipalities, that we charge on a unit basis, because from my perspective, whether it's a 5-unit apartment in Grafton, it still generates the need for the same level of servicing. It's only when you get into the, I'm using 10, but often it's 20 or 25 unit apartment building that you get into savings with respect to municipal service requirements.
Okay, that.
Go ahead. You have another one?
Well, I just listened to this and it says that if it's affordable, so 80% of the market rate, if they're exempt. Well, can I just build a smaller house and say that it's only 80% of the market, so I don't have to pay development charges?
It's usually rental that is the affordable one. So it's not just an owner. It's usually the affordable is usually a rental, and it's 80% rental, 80% of the market rent, and you have to prove that. And what we're recommending is that you enter into an agreement with the municipality in order to be justified that, because what's to say that the first year you charge 80% of the market rent, and the second year you make it up, you bring it up to market rent. So if you're going to be eligible for that reduction, then my suggestion is that there needs to be some sort of an agreement for at least a 5-year rental rate freeze, or not necessarily freeze, but maintaining it at the 80%.
Yeah.
The affordable level.
Go ahead,
Through you, Mayor Local.
Jennifer.
With respect to the affordability and the 80% thing, the Northumberland County has incentives that they will provide to landowners that are developing affordable rental units. And as part of that, the owner's required to enter into an agreement to maintain a certain rent level for, I believe it's 20 years. So they have to maintain that affordable rental level for 20 years in order to qualify for that grant. And if they don't, then they have to pay that grant back. And there's auditing at the county.
Thank you.
And they do that for anybody that proposes to build affordable.
They had a certain pot of money. I forget how much it was, and landlords could apply for the funding. I'm not sure.
I think it was
I'm not sure how much.
$10,000 per unit. Or was it
10 or
20,000?
20,000.
Maybe it's 20. I
thought
think
it
you're
was
right. I think it was
$20,000.
20,000 per unit.
I don't know how big and I don't know how much uptake they've had, but they had a certain fund set aside. But those were there was very specific criteria that they had to do, that they had to meet, and they
Yeah.
had to enter into an agreement to make sure that that unit remained affordable for 20 years.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Lovell. So yeah, just a couple of comments. I when I'm looking at Hamilton Township at $6,101 versus our 14,000. They got more of a population than we do, and then the water charge. It looks like it's about $26,000 for someone add on to the cost of their house right off the top. And I think if we're looking to get residents in here and people to come in here and build houses, I mean, I guess the development the developers would just add that to the top, to the cost of the house. So, you know, that the buyer is going to pay it one way or the other. So, I mean, I just, it's, you know, I just have a fear maybe we're scaring people away for the high, that higher cost. And, you know, I would suggest that we just, you know, move with caution, because I mean, why wouldn't they go somewhere else and save $30,000 on their cost?
I'm not sure where you're coming up with the.
Well, if the water thing is 11,000 and the
Oh, that you're adding the two
Yeah.
together. Okay.
right?
Okay, understand that. Yeah. okay.
So, I mean, it's quite an increase, and, you know, I just think we just need to really think about it.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Local, on the water fee that is here, when you are building a house and you're not tapping into municipal water, it's a real crapshoot if you're gonna pay 20,000 for a well, 30,000, 40,000. And this way, a person knows that this is what they're gonna have to pay for their water in their house. So I do see that it is getting up there, but it's nowhere near what it would cost to put a well on a property. And then you have all the municipal services and you never have to run out of water here.
That's good. That's a good point. And there's the initial cost that could be 25, 30, $35,000. I don't know what that is. I haven't
Even
drilled a
if
well
there
in
is,
years and
then
years.
You might not even get water. So
Well, that's true. And the other thing you do have, Mike, you know that you have good municipal water. You don't have to do the tests that you should do if you're on private wells, which is an expense or can be expensive. And certainly if your water doesn't meet the standards and you have to put in all of that testing equipment and that type of stuff, that can be, you know, expensive too. But anybody else got any other comments? Okay. What about Nicole, do you have a comment? If you're still there? I guess she doesn't. Okay. Yes. I'm not sure the name, sir, but you are welcome to make a question or comment if you like to. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to. Here.
If you could go to the presentation.
All right. Good day, council. Sorry, my name's Nicolas Proyos. I'm a resident of Roseneath. I'm in the middle of doing a construction build for myself and my wife. With obviously building our future. The reason why we picked the county, obviously for some reasons, that it was very affordable at the time, while we were looking like 2 years ago. And I just want to mention that, you know, the developmental charges that Bob Clark is suggesting for specifically the 11,813 with the proposal of the 14,000 and change is a 34% increase. So I'm just trying to understand as, you know, a private citizen who's looking to move into the community and looking at 34% increase. And my build is only going to be close to $1 million. And so I'm looking at it from the perspective that if things are going to cost way too much, I'm going to have to pull out. And I certainly don't want to do that. But I'm in a position where if things do go higher than anticipated, I'll be killing jobs that are local people that are obviously trying to support themselves in the community. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I think a 34% jump is a high jump. And that's what I'm being told if I pay my fees this year, which will kickstart my bill. So the only reason why I'm here today is just to get a better understanding of, you know, what's being proposed. And if that's the question of increased rates, I might be in a position where I might pull out. And that includes my investments and everything that I do within the community. And this is why I'm here today, to just put that comment out and maybe oppose that specific or have council relook at that particular percentage. And again, I do believe it is a high percentage. And if that's what's going to happen, I think a lot of people may look at that from that perspective and say, you know what, these rates are going a little too high, and I understand inflation and everything else. That's part of this whole process. But there's got to be a breaking point somewhere where it can be somewhat affordable if the county is looking for growth. And that's all I wanted to mention today.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name.
Nicholas Price or Nick Price.
Nick?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your question and your comments. I guess, the 14,000, if you're planning on building fairly quickly, that'll come down, as Jennifer said, down to $11,000. I don't know if you realize that or not before you come.
I've been told different in my. So that's why I'm here today.
Okay. You want to tell them that again? So you know what the figures are,
Okay,
please?
thank you.
This year.
Yes. Trust me, I'd love to, please.
If you came in for a building permit today,
Yes.
your development charge, the number is $11,813, I think, and 38 cents,
Correct.
something around that line.
Correct.
The changes to the Development Charges Act that Bill 23 brought in means that if council passed the $14,030.30 development charge that's justified with the report, we can only charge 80% of that. So
Okay.
that if that bylaw came into effect, say September or summer, the charge that you would be paying would be 80% of that, which is I just did a quick calculation here tonight. I believe it's $11,224. So
Okay.
that's actually about $600 less than our
That's
current DC that we're charging right now.
Correct.
And then next year, I'm assuming that the development charges bylaw, that it will increase by the 5% on the anniversary of the day the bylaw is passed. So if next summer, it would be $12,065.
I see.
And then the following summer, it would be 12,627.
Okay.
The following summer, it would be 13,328.
Okay.
And then finally, in 2027, it would be the full development charge of 14,030. That being said, the development charges bylaw contains a provision that you can have annual indexing according to the construction price index. So each January, the number is indexed
Okay.
to account for inflation.
That makes sense. Perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
I have a question. Has the township done that historically? Added on the 5% each year?
No, it's not a 5%.
Okay.
It's the phase, this.
Oh, it's 5% of the,
5% phasing in is new.
yes,
We index it each year.
we do index
We
it
do
each year.
index it each year.
Okay,
And our bylaw our current bylaw allows the municipality to index it without having to pass a new development charges bylaw. It's just an automatic annual indexing.
yeah. And is that's not 5%, or is it 5%?
No, it's whatever the construction price index is.
Okay,
And we call our consultants, or we find out what the construction price index is, and that's prescribed in the Development Charges Act.
okay. Thank you. Do you have any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here and asking your question.
Very thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe there's some other people on Zoom that could be asking a question. Grit, are you interested? Oh, Grit's got her hand up. Go ahead, Grit.
Indeed, I do. And I'm the only one on Zoom as far as I can tell. So here I am asking my questions. Through you, Mayor Logo, to Mr. Clark. I read through your report, and I was at the meeting when you presented to the previous council your development charge report. And in that report, I think, I'm picturing the page, and I think you said there was remaining in the township 684 potential lots for development. Is that true?
I would have to check my mind.
Well, it doesn't have to be exact, but I think that's the number I saw.
Okay.
Is that what you were kind of looking at, Jennifer, there? I know you were only a short portion of it, but that's basically the similar question?
Do you mean the severance report that came to the planning committee yesterday?
That's what I'm referring to, yes.
No,
No,
not at
that's-
all.
Okay.
That's different.
This would be different.
Okay,
What we've relied on, and as it indicates on page 8 and page 9, we've relied on the potential projection of growth for permanent population to 7,395. And your permanent population in 2021 was 7,063, or sorry, 7,060. And so we did a calculation that there would be an opportunity for approximately 684 new lots in the town.
okay.
Okay, so that explains that. And yes, so I did read the severance review as well, which was really great to see. So that would obviously reduce, not by much though. So when it comes down to it, the township of Alnwick-Haldeman is a rural agricultural township, with agricultural being number 1, tourism being 2. So due to the makeup of our township, with almost 45% being the Oak Ridges Moraine, and we've got lakes on either end, we have a lot of environmentally sensitive areas. The ability for growth in this township should not be encouraged to become anything other than rural development or hamlet residential development. We should not be looking to try and put in urban development here. That would just be a no-no for the nature of this area. And I will take that even one step further. I'll go beyond just the borders of Alnwick-Haldeman and encompass all of Northumberland County. And if it were to be one massive region, we don't have a huge population, 90,000 approximately, you would still have to protect this swath of land just by the very nature of it. So trying to pretend that we're going to encourage lots of development, it doesn't seem realistic to me. So the development charges historically, and I have been attending council meetings across this county for over 6 years, and development charges have historically been behind the 8 ball all the time. Municipalities are always charging less and less. So there's never been a full development charge. When we built here, we had to pay development charges plus the water charge. And that's 20 years ago. And it was still, I know it had to be around $14,000 to $16,000 back then. So here we are talking 20 years later, and we're still playing catch up. And now the provincial government, if I understand correctly, Bill 23 is going to actually set us backwards, which means that the taxpayers are now once again subsidizing development. Is that what has happened? Has Bill 23 actually been mandated that we have to do this 80, 85, 90, 95% over 4 years? Because it's 5 years before we're even at 100%. And then once we reach that point in 2027, it's time to review the development charges, and we're still going to be behind. Is that the case, that's been mandated?
Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, that is the case, that the development charges are phased in, and as you've heard, you actually get a reduction in the development charge at the 80% rate. And this growth is a 15-year growth that we're looking at. So it ends up looking about 20 units per year, 20 to 30 units per year. So yeah, that and I agree with you that we don't want to change the nature of the municipality, but there is an opportunity for growth. And if the municipality can take advantage of that in their urban areas or hamlets.
Well, our hamlet areas, they're not urban.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
One more question.
Go ahead.
This is one that's been very interesting for me when I read it quite a while back, but the 60% of monies in the development charges reserves for your water, wastewater, and roads must be spent or allocated each year. We're in the process of putting in a new well in Grafton. And we've got 384 thousand, I believe, in development charges. And yet with the new well coming forward, it appears that we're only going to be using 4% of our development charges. Would it not be prudent to be using 60% of the development charges towards the new well?
Through there.
Go ahead.
It is a requirement now that at least 60% of the reserve fund that's allocated for that year has to be spent in that year. So yes, it is. It directs staff to look at where your reserve funds are and where your funding is coming from. And I suspect the municipality in their budgeting process looks at that number and makes those calculations.
Nicole, do you want to comment?
Yeah, and I kind of have a question for Bob as well, because it was my understanding that 60%, that if we, when this starts in 2024, I believe, if we start doing projections for a project or have a 10-year plan, as long as 60% of those reserves are allocated within that plan, that we would be covered. And I could be wrong on that, Bob. The other thing I know that Grit is talking about, and I had talked to you about previously when she was talking about the 4%, what we were looking at for the well was 4.75%, which I believe was the 10-year expected growth, because that well is not specifically related to development. My understanding is 4.75% of that project is as much as we can actually pull from those development reserves. So maybe you could just comment on that, Bob.
Okay, I think there's two different aspects here. There's what can we include in the calculation of the development charge, and that has to be related to the growth. And I think that's where you're getting probably where you're getting the 4.75% growth. But the 60% is the amount that's allocated in that particular, from the reserve funds for that particular year. And what the act is directing you to look at is making sure that you spend at least 60% of the amount that's allocated in that year from the reserve fund. So I suspect, as I say, when you're doing your budgeting for the year, you know that you have to make use of the reserve funds. And I think that's what the act is directing you to do, is to make sure that you do make use of the reserve funds rather than holding them and then relying on other sources of funding.
Thank you. Nicole, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. So my question then would be to use those funds. My understanding is we have to have something that is directly, so for water's a great example right now. So if we have a large project, but that is not directly related to development, my understanding is we can't pull from those funds, that we could only pull from those funds for the portion that would be considered development.
That's correct. Yes.
So like if we were actually growing, we were putting that well in because we just finished putting a subdivision in, so we need to put that new well in, but that's not the case in this situation. We're replacing a well that is already currently there. However, a portion of that would be allocated to development.
Yes.
Greg, go ahead.
Through your worship, to either Bob or Nicole, then so that I can understand, if we've got roughly $350,000 in there right now, you're saying, Bob, the allocated from that year. So if we only had 2 houses built with the water, 2 times 11, 22,000, we'd have to spend 60% of the 22,000? Or is it 60% of the whole pot that you've got right now,
My understanding is it's 60% of the amount that you
earned that year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor
So whatever's
Catherine?
in there
Oh,
right
go ahead.
now is totally separate.
Well.
If you had
what-
$100,000 sitting in there right now, they're not talking about 60% of that 100,000,
No,
right?
they're not, but you may choose to allocate a certain amount of that $100,000 for that expenditure, and then they're making sure that you spend at least 60% of the amount, the allocated amount. That's my understanding of how that works.
Okay, and I guess my second question would be, like Nicole said, so if we had 2 lots in there, let's just keep it simple, $22,000, and we have to spend 60% of that, and we don't have anything that's growth related, what's the penalty? Is there like, if you don't have something to spend it on, is there anything in that bill that says what's the penalty if you don't spend that 60%?
Well, that's why my understanding is that it's what you've allocated to expend during that year. Because your asset management plan has a forecast for expenditure, and they want to make sure that you're spending it from a portion of the reserve fund.
Okay,
And you're making use of I think that's what they're trying to get at, is that you're using your reserve fund. Now, the specifics of how that's going to work, I can't be completely confident that I know exactly how that's going to work.
okay, thank you.
Mary Catherine?
Just to follow up on Councillor Booth. So wouldn't that not constrain our ability to accumulate to do a project if we've got to spend it in little bits?
No, I'm not suggesting you spend it in little bits. I'm suggesting that you do an allocation of what you're going to be expending over the year. And then if you've allocated $20,000, you have to spend 12,000 of that. If you've allocated $20,000 from your reserve fund, you have to make sure that you spend at least $12,000 of that, 60%. So it's an allocation. My understanding, it's an allocation process that you take the 100,000, you allocate that over 15 years, and you make sure that you're spending the amount, at least 60% of the amount that you've allocated over that period of time. Now, it's not to say that you couldn't reallocate because you've got a change in situation. I think all they're trying to get at is that you don't accumulate your reserves, you make use of them.
Grit, you have a question?
I do. So coming back to this whole allocation and development charges. When you have a major infrastructure project that has to happen because you need it for the system that's in place. And in order for future growth to even happen, you have to have that system in place. We've been without our second well as a backup well for well over a decade now. And it's if our first well goes, they're going to be trucking water in for everybody in this community here. So I would like to know, when you need the second well as the backup well, why that would not be considered necessary towards future development as well as what is in existence already. And can you not allocate more of the development charges towards the cost of the well?
Go ahead, Bob.
And I think that's what I'm getting at, is that it's an allocation. If you've determined that you need the second well, and you've got a reserve fund in your development charges for that purpose, then you can allocate that, and they want to make sure that you're actually using it. So that's as far as I can take it. The specifics of that are going to be left for your staff to work through. But the purpose of this process and this provision is that you don't continue to accumulate without a purpose for it being spent, because we've gone through the process of looking at your future expenditures and allocating certain amounts of that to come from development charges, then this 60% is a requirement that you're actually using the money that you're collecting.
Thank you. And you're speaking right to exactly what I'm referring to, because we have had money sitting in the reserve account for a very, very, very long time, and it hasn't been used. Now the provincial government is mandating that this money needs to be used. So what percentage would we be able to use out of that existing development fund towards a new well? And the reason it really sits with me is because in addition to the cost of the well, which was built into our development or our water rates through now to 2069 in our 2021 water rates study, those costs for a debenture for that new well was built into those water rates. So we will be accumulating money over the next, right through to 2069. I'm not going to calculate right now, 37 years, 36 years, 46 years. No, 36. Yeah, quite a few, a long time. So we're putting money away now for the future anyways, and it should be reallocated, in my opinion, to a different account other than a debenture. That money should now be going into our water reserves, reallocated. It's just a matter of number. I'm not saying give it back to the water users, because we now have $1.267 million in provincial and federal funding for the well, which when the water rate study was done, we had not been able to secure funding for the well. So I'm just thinking that there should be some relief here for the water users, rather than not only paying for the debenture, but not being able to use the water reserves. So I'm trying to sort that one out, that it makes sense for what's going on in our township. Thank you.
Thank you, Grit. Just one quick comment. When we were listening to the training there in Baltimore this week, and that was put on by well, actually it was a gentleman that works in Belleville at the water treatment plant there, but it was for the Walkerton, what am I looking for?
Enter.
The training to make sure that we're doing everything we're supposed to do as far as the water. Anyways, his comment was that if you have
Safe
to
Water Act.
Clean Water Act. Thank you, Grit. He was saying that for a meter of construction to put in your water lines, that's about $25,000 in today's cost. So if you had a mile, it adds up pretty quick. And like we have 10 miles, 10 kilometers, I think, roughly, maybe a little bit high on that. But there's $25 million that you need to have when that's coming. And we don't expect to be coming yet for another, probably, like you're saying, 50 years or 30 years or whatever, but still you have to be putting something away all along that. And when you have to use up 60% of it all the time, then that's a little bit over my head, but that's why we have experts, I guess. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Logo. Is it that it has to be spent, or that the 60% has to be allocated? Because if you have an asset management plan that's calling for the replacement of your water pipes in 15 to 20 years, can you not allocate 60% of your charges from that year towards that future expenditure? So you don't have to pay that. You don't have to use your $12,000 up each year. You can allocate them towards something that's identified in your asset management plan. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that makes me feel good. Grit, last call. Go ahead.
Why is it last call? Just out of curiosity?
Oh, I want to go home.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So, I hear everything you're saying, Mayor Logal, but the reality is that our water rate studies that are done every 5 years, well, they're done every 10, but every 5 years they're reviewed. All of the money that's going in there has factored in all of those charges that you're talking about. And if it hasn't, then why are we paying these consultants to prepare those studies if they're not building all of those expenses in. So if we're doing proper management, all of the financing should be there and ready in place when we get there. We've got in 2025 and 2026, I believe, we've got some major expenses just in replacement for some of the infrastructure at the water plant. So that's already been built in. We're aware of it. It's included in the water study. Just like they included debenture money in the water study. Well, now we don't need a debenture. So I'm not saying to take the money back, Mayor Longo. I'm saying to reallocate it where it belongs, which should now be to reserves for our future capital and infrastructure expenditures down the road. So by all means, I believe we have to pay for it. And then on the same token, on the other hand, we're charging less and less and less for development charges. So it's the taxpayers and the users that are here now that are subsidizing even more. I find that very hard to take.
I think we're saying the same thing. That we have to maintain our system and the new people coming on have to pay their share of the cost.
Correct, but that's not what's happening based on the Bill 23.
Oh, okay. Well, Bill 23 is something that I can't comment too much on it because it's been directed, and I guess I could be like other people and displace my displeasure, but then I don't mind doing that, but whether I'm successful or not is another thing.
Or perhaps it's time for municipalities to stand up to the provincial government and say, we are not in favor of these kinds of proposals or bills that are being passed behind people's backs and no one knows what's going on.
Okay. Anybody else have any further comments? Bob, anything else that you want to do?
I think so. They've been good comments.
Yes, it were all good comments.
I would just
So-
like, Mayor Local, I would just like to make one last comment. I would like to thank Bob Clark for all of the thorough studies and reports he has done over the past 6 years that I've been able to see, whether it's Grafton Heights subdivision or any of the other reports he's covered. He's always been so thorough and very informative. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Grit. Bob's shaking his hand that he likes it, so, or shaking his head that he likes it. So I'm sure actually he's been doing it for a lot longer than 6 years, but the time that I've known him, I found him to be a very respectful and intelligent person as well. So thank you for making that comment. So anybody else have any? Oh, go ahead, Pat.
I just, if council want to give Mr. Clark direction, whether you're happy with the proposal that it is now, or if you want to change something, he just needs to know before we move forward.
Okay. Would you be making any recommendations that we change, or this is what you're?
Well, I think based on what I've heard this evening, I don't have any recommendations for change.
Okay,
Other than what I presented.
thank you. Anybody else have any comments to that effect? Go ahead.
You, Mayor Lobo. What if, I know it's hard to plan on the what ifs, what if we found that we needed a change? What happens then to do an inclusion into this?
You can amend the development charges bylaw. Or as we bring the bylaw forward, if you want to make changes to the bylaw before it's adopted. So you have two options. If some circumstance changes and you feel that you need to make an amendment, you can either change the bylaw in its draft form, or if it's after the bylaw is adopted, you can amend.
Okay, thank you.
So you can amend it
Yes.
once it's in place. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Mike, go ahead.
Through Mayor Logo. So just clarification for me, we're not actually voting on the charges here tonight, are we? Are we going to have our own meeting after this?
Go ahead, Pat. You have a
Well,
comment?
based on the chart that Mr. Clark had presented. So if council are okay with the development charges as they stand in his presentation, then council would be giving him direction to proceed with the bylaw. If you want to change those amounts or you want time to review it, then you need to make a motion tonight to say that you want to review it and then have a meeting and then we get back to Mr. Clark and let him know what council's decision is.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make that motion that we have time to review the whole thing again.
Okay. You've moved that, we want to defer it till, have you got a timeline or?
As soon as possible, I guess, like, maybe next week or something,
Okay,
if we can fit that in.
or, we wouldn't have to have a special meeting, would we?
No, but we've already circulated the agenda for April 4th meeting, so April 18th, is that satisfactory? with council
Yep.
to bring it back?
Yeah,
I need a
everybody's
second
good.
or first, I guess.
Yep.
So the motion has been to defer till the second meeting in April, which, April. So can I get a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay,
Thank you.
so it's been moved by Mike, seconded by Councillor Booth, that we open it up for discussion, and I'll open it up for discussion. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff on there, and I mean, like, I feel maybe we should have a development charge that's set for our residents, and maybe one for the new people or the developers that are coming in. And I also think that there's some of these smaller development charges that gone up 115 or 18%, right? So I mean, and it just doesn't sit well with me that it's so much, and I think we're like Nick, the gentleman, the same thing I was talking about. Like, we're going to scare people away if they're looking at an extra $30,000 to build here now. We'll call them a township, and versus a well or versus a town water. It's still that. So
You're not suggesting that we cancel development charges altogether, are you?
well, no, but I'm just thinking that we should try to make it so that it interests people, because I think at the bottom line, the way money is right now with people, and the interest rate's gone up, and cost of living, like, it's hurting a lot of people. So I mean, it's, we're like third highest on that whole chart.
I'll ask the question, Bob, can you actually have two different development charges, whether a person is local or not local? Is that possible?
I must admit, I've never seen that. When we do the calculation, it's just a residential unit. It doesn't have anything to do with where the individual came from.
I mean, so on top of it, I mean, so let's just say someone's been living here for 10 years, so they've been paying taxes for 10 years to help with all those services. And now we're going to charge them, a whack of extra money just to build another house for their child or something. Right. So I think it needs to be looked at, and kind of go through it together and see what fits us. I mean, I understand where it's all coming from, but I mean, I just look at it as it's, I just think it's too much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Booth.
Sorry, through your worship to Bob. Bob, those other municipal or townships that you showed us, are they currently reviewing theirs now? Some of them are quite low.
Yeah, no, some of them are reviewing their because the mileage of different.
So more than likely, they'll be more in line with, I would think.
Our experience certainly is that costs have gone up and DCs will follow.
And I see Councillor Ainsworth's point, but I also see the other side, which is, somebody's got to pay for these services. And whether or not it's somebody outside, inside, or whatever, if you're coming here and you want to build, everybody's got to pay their fair share, right? So I see both sides, but I just don't believe we do have the option, as Deputy Mayor Stover found out, that if we find out in the future we want to change it, but we just seem to be delaying this, and it's just I don't see what another week is gonna do, Mike, but I seconded it, put it on the floor, but I'll be voting against putting it forward another week. We can always change it if we want to in the future.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
To you, Mayor Lobo. So just so I'm clear, somebody that wants to get paid development charges to build today would pay $11,813.38. So when you look at that, and then, I mean, there's a few people that are going to be putting in the Grafton water, but for the most part, the development charges are going to be $11,813.38. In today's build, and I built 4 years ago, if I got a bill for $11,000, and I understand new people building, that is a drop in the bucket, because houses are running in $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 houses. So, I mean, to come to a municipality and not want to pay $11,813.38 in development charges, maybe you aren't in a position to build a house in the first place. And I say that respectfully, because when you think what you're getting for $11,813.38, it's all part of the infrastructure buying into the needs of the municipalities. So I would be supporting to go ahead with the figures that I see today. And that's that would be all I would have to say.
Thank you. Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lobo. So, Deputy Stover is it's clear, but add the severance package charge to it all. Right? So add the severance package charge to it all, and then now add your development charges. So before anybody gets ready to put a shovel in the ground, it's probably going to cost them 30 grand. So
Yep, that's not bad figuring. Go ahead, Mayor Catherine.
It's the job of us as councillors in a municipal government to provide services to people, and we have to pay for the services, and we've had the justified charge amount given to us to pay for the services that we're currently providing. That's not it allowing us to do more services. That's saying this is how much it is moving forward to provide what we are already providing.
I would like us
Go ahead.
to make sure we are running our township as lean as possible before we start looking at charging residents extra money because maybe we're not doing our job. So until we get to the point where we know that we're running lean and we're doing everything proper and we're cutting out all the fat, then coming up with a development charge is like putting a Band-Aid over it.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit off subject, so I think we're done
No.
discussing it, so I'd like to call a vote. The vote is that moved and seconded that we defer till April 17th, 18th, pardon me, April 18th. So I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor of waiting till the 18th?
Through you, was that the motion or was it the motion to bring it on the floor for discussion?
No, the motion
No,
was,
I seconded it so we can
To
discuss.
bring it on the floor. Okay, thank you for the quick.
but it was to delay till the 18th.
And for discussion
Okay.
as well.
So all in favor of delaying this consideration till the April 18th meeting? Raise your hand. All opposed? Motion is not carried. Lost. Thank you. Don't do too many votes too often. Okay, is there another motion on the floor then? Move, Greg, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with the
Presentation
Mr. Clark's presentation.
and recommendations as he's done.
Yes.
Did I get a seconder for that?
As discussed tonight.
Seconded by Mary Catherine. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mike.
I would ask that we have a recorded vote.
We can do that. Thank you. Pat, will you take that over for us, please?
Ainsworth,
No.
Booth,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
sorry, Stover,
Yes. I'm in favor of this.
And Lobo.
Yes. Announcement,
Carried.
please.
Yeah, it's carried 4-1.
Motion is carried 4-1. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Next, we've got bylaw to approve, confirming bylaw number 36, 2023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council session held on Wednesday, March the 29th, 2023. Be it resolved that bylaw number 36-2023, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council session held on Wednesday, March the 29th, 2023, be read and deemed passed this 29th day of March 2023. Did I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councilor O'Neill, seconded by Deputy Mayor Stover. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. And finally, adjournment. Be it resolved that special council session of Wednesday, March 29th, 2023 be adjourned at 8:20 PM. All in favor? Oh, pardon me, mover and seconder. Moved by Councilor Booth and seconded by Deputy Mayor Stover. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, everyone.